On December 12, 2021, the front page of People's Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's top media outlet, wrote, "So what about food?" It was a question asked by the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, leader Xi Jinping at a high-level meeting. Xi said, in some places, instead of growing food, a large amount of good land is either built into animal farms or planted with flowers and fruits. The area of arable land continues to decrease, so what about food? The answer given to Xi by the CCP officials is to import. According to the latest data from China's General Administration of Customs, from January to November 2021, China's grain imports exceeded 150 million tons, including a one-fold increase in cereal, a two-fold increase in corn, and a 97% increase in rice. According to the director of the Chinese Department of Grain Reserves in November, China's total grain stocks are at an all-time high, with wheat stocks able to last for a year and a half. The latest statistics from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, show that China has more than half of the world's stocks of corn, rice, wheat, and other major grains. According to the USDA projections, in the first half of 2022, China's grain stocks will account for 69% of global stocks for corn, 60% for rice, and 51% for wheat. Each of these grain reserves in China, whose global percentage has increased by about 20% over the past 10 years, indicates that the Communist Party has been stockpiling massive amounts of grains. China has less than 20% of the world's population, yet its grain stocks exceeded more than half of the world's total stocks. Such a disproportion has led experts in many countries to worry about rising global food prices and possible food shortages elsewhere. The director of Japan's Institute for Resources and Food Research believes that China's large grain reserves are one of the reasons for the high global food prices. The latest food price index from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations shows that global food prices rose by about 30% in November 2021 compared to the same month in 2020. For the CCP, it doesn't want the outside world to know its actual food situation. However, given that the number of imports can't be falsified, customs data clearly shows that the Communist Party is increasing its food reserves, thus confirming in a way that China is having a food crisis. China's official news coverage of food supply has always featured the country's bumper crop and increased production every year, and 2021 is no exception. On November 6, 2021, China's National Bureau of Statistics published data on grain production, stating that the total grain production in 2021 was slightly higher than in 2020. Heavy rains and floods swept through most of China in 2021 since June. They hit the major grain-producing provinces of Henan and Hubei. At the end of September, a vice-governor of Henan province confessed that the floods had caused heavy losses in the province, affecting over 1 million hectares of crops in the province. He said, "Our autumn crop will be reduced to a certain extent." But Chinese officials soon changed their story, saying that this year's grain harvest would be a bumper one.
这今年的秋收还没有结束，这专家里面把计算成果算出来了，说今年又是大丰收啊，比去年增产200亿斤。我勒个乖乖呀！你是咋计算的？你是做梦计算的，还是你到我们河南每家每户来称了？还是说今年我们河南受洪涝灾害，水分比较大，你把水分也计算上去了？你成天都坐到了办公室，闭住你的手。
On December 19th, CCTV, China's state television, reported that despite the floods and other natural disasters in China this year, and the sharp fluctuations in international food prices, China's food market was still well supplied in the first 11 months of the year, and food prices remained steadily rising in China. Only those who are familiar with the propaganda techniques of the CCP can read between the lines and get the really important messages. For example, on November 26th, China's Economic Daily published a front-page article about China's bumper grain harvest and increased production. The report was careful to mention that it didn't change the basic situation, that the balance of grain supply and demand in China was relatively strained, and that it didn't solve the structural shortage of grains. In addition, the Chinese Ministry of Commerce issued a notice in early November encouraging people to stock up on necessities. which triggered a panic rush to buy. It led to an odd situation in which the price of some common vegetables soared by 50% in just 1 month, and spinach was more expensive than pork. For the Chinese people, perhaps the most intuitive signal is the government's promotion of the Finishing the Plate campaign. The campaign of finishing the plate means eating up what's on one's plate and curbing the food waste trend. The slogan was launched in 2013, but the real action started in 2020 when many online eating shows were banned. In April 2021, China passed the Anti-Food Waste Law, and in November, the State Council issued the Food Conservation Action Plan, which states that the Finishing the Plate campaign should be carried out in depth until 2025. Some of the specific measures include encouraging restaurant owners to take the initiative to provide customers with smaller portions of food and smaller portions of rice, and encouraging the public to report food waste. However, the CCP officials, on the other hand, don't feel the urgency. Here, for example, farmers sun-dry their grains in front of their houses. They didn't occupy the city's streets. The government deliberately drenched the area with sprinklers to force the farmers to stop drying their grains there, for the sake of the city's appearance. If the CCP's claim of a bumper crop were true, common sense dictates that it won't need to import so much grain. The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, or CASS, has predicted that by the end of the period 2021 to 2025, that is, by 2024 or 2025, China could have a grain shortfall of about 130 million tons. Now we see that China's food imports have already exceeded 150 million tons in 2021, which is more than the shortfall estimated by CASS. In other words, there is a significant shortfall in China's food supply in 2021, even before the year of 2025. In reality, Chinese customs data in 2020 showed that China's grain imports had already exceeded 125 million tons. China's food crisis has existed for years and is getting worse every year. Data from the General Administration of Customs of China shows that China's food imports, excluding beverages, reached $98.1 billion in 2020, an increase of 4.6 times in 10 years. Imports of soybeans, corn, and wheat jumped to 2 to 12 times in the last 5 years. Beef, pork, dairy products, and fruits also increased 2 to 5 times. In addition, China has made major acquisitions of foreign food companies, such as European meat processing companies and New Zealand dairy companies. So why is there a food crisis in China? Back in 1994, Lester Brown, an American scholar, published a study with the U.S. Department of Agriculture entitled, "Who Will Feed China?" In the report, he said that China's rapid industrialization would destroy its natural resources and desertify its land, and that, as China's population grew, it would need to import large amounts of food to feed more than 1 billion people, which would lead to higher global food prices and disrupt the global food market. Brown's study provoked severe criticism from the CCP, with both the People's Daily and the state news agency Xinhua claiming that Lester Brown was creating a China threat theory. During China's 30 years of rapid economic development, there has been a systematic shortage of food. On the one hand, large portions of farmland have been polluted by industrialization, or has been used as industrial land or sold for real estate development. Many local governments have forcibly confiscated farmers' land and sold it for profit.
看看哈，大家都看看哈，这是山东省聊城市徐营镇政府雇佣黑帮30来人，带领用铲车将我们的大棚、将我们的土地，给太平大商国村村民20-30人。 中等病号还在中等监护室抢救，求全群众们给转发，让全国都知道这些黑社会，让全国都知道这些黑政府、这些败类，求群众们了哈！谢谢大家帮忙给转发。
大家都不是都没得老百姓吃都指着了。
In the video, this cameraman said that this is a village in Henan province. The local town government has recruited businessmen from out of town to build a large stone quarry. They have been forcing the farmers to give up their land by mining with artillery and digging up their ancestors' graves. The villagers have been petitioning for more than 10 years without results, and some of them have been taken to the police station. On the other hand, the CCP has been suppressing food prices through government policies. Combined with various taxes, the CCP has increased the burden of farmers who aren't interested in growing grains. China has long had a strict household registration system, which doesn't allow farmers to easily relocate to cities. Chinese farmers have always been fixed at the bottom of the social ladder. Many rural people have been working in the cities. Despite being at the bottom of the urban hierarchy, they can earn more than working in the rural areas as farmers growing food. As a result, much of the arable land has become vacant in rural China, leading to a constant shortage of grain. In 2004, Lester Brown wrote again that due to the decline of grain production for 4 of the last 5 years, China imported large amounts of grain, causing international grain prices to rise. The demand for food in China was still rising because as Chinese incomes rose, they were moving up the food chain to consume more grain-fed livestock products such as pork, poultry, and eggs. Brown predicted back then that China would soon be importing up to 50 million tons of food a year from the global market. This would soon end the world's food overcapacity and cheap food of the last half-century. At present, the CCP is facing a dilemma. On the one hand, domestic food production is lacking, requiring massive imports to meet demand. On the other hand, China's overall economy is in decline, and its foreign exchange reserves are almost at the bottom. Moreover, the overall international environment has changed dramatically. While the relationship with the United States is deteriorating, the CCP itself has intentionally created several supposed enemies such as Canada, Australia, and other major sources of Chinese food imports. If these American allies unite to sanction the CCP, then China's food crisis will become a major problem. What should China do? Currently, the CCP has made some arrangements. According to CCTV, Xi Jinping demanded the protection of arable land, saying that 120 million hectares of arable land must be conserved in real terms. Farmland is farmland, and it must be fertile land. We must expand the planting of soybeans and oilseeds and achieve measurable results. He asked the Chinese government to make structural changes and expand soybeans and oilseeds. Mayors should be directly responsible for this task and ensure the safety of pork, vegetables, and other products. At the latest high-level meeting of the Communist Party, Xi said, "The rice bowl of the Chinese people must be firmly held in their own hands at all times, and the rice bowl should mainly be filled with food grown in China to ensure food security."
我们务必落实好最严格的耕地保护制度。
We must implement the strictest protection system for cultivated land and strictly control and regulate the use of arable land. We will continue to develop high-standard farmland and complete 1 billion mu, or 666.67 million hectares, of high-standard farmland by 2022 with high yield, regardless of drought and flood. The central government has formulated an action plan for the revitalization of the seed industry. We will work with relevant departments to comprehensively promote the protection and utilization of seed resources, tackle key problems in innovation, support enterprises, upgrade bases, and purify the market. Through issuing these packages of measures, China will gradually realize self-reliance and self-strengthening of science and technology in the seed industry, as well as self-control in seed source. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang made the same plea, saying, "Strictly enforce the primary role of responsibility for local food security, stabilize the acreage of grain plantings, and promote increased production of soybeans and oilseeds." Following the CCP Central Committee's decision to expand soybean planting, the Chinese government subsequently held a national meeting of directors of agricultural and rural departments. At the meeting, the expansion of soybean and oilseed production has been turned into a major political task that must be accomplished in 2022. China has set a long-term goal of self-sufficiency in pork production aiming to produce 95% of its protein domestically by 2025, on the premise that the global food supply must be secured to feed the world's largest pig herd. Thus, the amount of soybeans and feed grains need to be secured. An official researcher from the Agricultural Research Center explained to Chinese media that the expansion of soybeans and oilseeds is to reinforce self-sufficiency and stabilize oil and feed supply. At the same time, China should also promote import diversification in foreign trade to reduce its dependence on a single country, to reduce the risk of various contingencies. This interpretation is in line with the tone of the officials of China's Development and Reform Commission. Another Chinese official suggested that in the face of the great uncertainty of the international political and economic situation and the outbreak, China should first promote the diversification of import sources. In addition to the traditional major importers such as Brazil, the United States, and Argentina, China should also increase imports from Russia, Ukraine, and other countries along the Belt and Road route, such as Africa. From the standpoint of strategic security, the Chinese Communist government has no choice but to take some remedial measures. But it's too late to drive full steam ahead with a renewed emphasis on expanding the area of bean cultivation. Much of China's farmland will never be restored to its original state. Under the corrupt and rigid system of the CCP, officials are unprofessional and seek only political accomplishments rather than practical work. When officials use administrative orders to forcefully interfere with the production of farming, it's feared that it will only make things worse and make farmers more distressed. For example, the CCP once encouraged farmers to raise chickens and pigs, then changed the policy and prohibited them from raising chickens and pigs. When the policy was changed, government officials sent people to forcibly demolish the animal farms and declare them illegal.
我当时来的时候，都给我发的事务所完全合理合法的。那个年代，2000年以前，我们乡党委书记刘国、王志敬亲自表扬我，鼓励的我，让我这儿来的。那阵是米担子、菜篮的工程。 让我带动了安义庄，我把安义庄带动了申银呐，这养殖户了，我是首批养殖户了。哎，我是起的完全合法的手续，倒是结果是完全不合法。这是我们双桥镇党委书记戴超说给我的。 这点弄，那成的。我录。到时候我死哪儿去，我都知道我死哪儿死的，哪儿都有人气死的鬼呀！哎。 700，这边都是命苦，都是命苦啊！哎呀，看看，都空了，我半儿大家了，我3块钱不到，我好几十万呢，败大家了。 是，唐山市委你们咋决定的？我咋让我败的这个大家呀？我没有，我既没抢占，我又没讹占，又没啥的，我都是合法占的，都是你们当时批的，都是你们当时亲自批的。
Faced with major crises, the CCP's responses have been lagging. Perhaps this is because the world has changed so quickly. The issue of food security is now not just a matter of people's livelihood for the CCP, but has risen to the level of political security. It's driving the CCP to make strategic changes, namely to reduce its dependence on the West. The CCP may be making a series of plans in the direction of decoupling from the world and moving toward a closed-door state.